Welcome back to Sunday edition here on KTN News. Let's go back to that issue that does not seem to be going away anywhere anytime soon. The bittersweet reports that keep coming up every day about sugar. And of course, let's base our discussion on the main story on the Sunday Standard this morning, who have highlighted some of the major facts about what has been happening according to an investigation they did. That is, of course, from the sugar that was imported in mid-2017 in the midst of the crisis in the sugar belts in this country. A lot of almost all the companies operating at below 50%. Some of them closed down as we speak. Just very quickly, how much sugar was imported between May and September in 2017? That is 39.1 billion value. That is the value of the sugar imported in those 3 months only. The quantity of sugar imported in terms of kilograms, 417 million. 631 is the number of times companies imported the sugar from anywhere in the country, in the world. 600,000 annual production capacity in this country in terms of metric tons. The demand is 800,000, so there's a deficit of 200,000 Kenya shillings. There is around 200,000 sugarcane farmers in the country. The number of sugar mills in Kenya, amidst all this, is 11. So let me start with you, Dismas, again. Just what gives? What do you think is happening here? The sugar belt is dying, but we have all these traders, faceless individuals, benefiting from these imports of sugar. Is there a solution that you see from where you sit?
Of course, there's a solution. And the solution lies in the National Assembly. They had a debate last week. But in the formation of a committee to do investigations around sugar, the members fear these sugar crisis, because there were genuine issues raised at the floor that as soon as you become a member of any of those committees, some cartel members would approach you and they would compromise your ability to take the decision. And in my view, the only person in Kenya who can crack these corruption cartels, especially in the sugar sector, is President Muigai Kenyatta. He's the only one who's got that huge political capital and state power to do that. Because when you have members of the National Assembly casting aspersions on themselves, on their integrity to engage in this investigation, then we are a worried lot. Then number two, you do not need to have a rocket scientist or neurosurgeons to have a conversation on how we can work the sugar issue in Kenya. Why can't we just go back to Western Kenya and ask ourselves, how come the cost of producing sugar in Kenya is much higher than Brazil? We recently had a healthcare crisis, and we've gone to Cuba. We've gotten some medical doctors,
right.
And I'm hoping you're going to get a medical infrastructure so that we sort out our healthcare in Kenya. Why can't we do the same for the sugar sector? If Brazil is the cheapest in the world, why can't we go and get those best practices so that sugarcane farmers in Nyanza and in Western Kenya
right.
are able to produce sugar at a cost which is competitive? Because as it is right now, I understand if you smuggle sugar through Mogadishu or from Brazil, wherever it is, you can easily sell a kilo for about 60 shillings. And then while the one which has been produced by farmers in Mumias goes for almost double the price. Where did we get it wrong? Does it mean that Kenya doesn't have agronomists, does not have economists, does not have farmers, people who can think? And then number two, is that strategy to marginalize people in Western Kenya by ensuring that the production is just very high, that it's no longer viable? And this one is not only limited to sugarcane.
Right.
The same thing applies in the maize sector. You remember a few weeks ago we were discussing about maize, that it's easier to get maize from Uganda. And then now when you come to the testing of this sugar, this week there have been many statements. On one hand, Dr. Matiang'i says there are impurities in this sugar, and then on the other hand, Adan Mohamed said there is no mercury. A few days later, they issue a joint statement saying that there are slight impurities. And then somebody else again says...
Yeah, a lot of disjointed information, like you say. Very good points you raised at Dismas. And of course, some of the countries where this sugar was imported from: Brazil, Swaziland, Madagascar, right here on the continent, Guatemala, Zimbabwe, Thailand, Mauritius, Zambia, and Mozambique, among other countries. These are, of course, according to that report that was tabled in Parliament. in the National Assembly. Let's go to some of the reactions now on these issues from the National Assembly. Let's listen in to the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, Opiyo Wandayi.
Sugar is not just a Western Kenya affair. The sugar industry in this country has got the potential to contribute immensely to the GDP, Madam Speaker, if well nurtured. Many civilized nations take it upon themselves to protect their farmers. This country has failed lamentably in the matter of protecting its farmers. Now, Speaker, if the sugarcane farmers would be protected and supported to engage in meaningful sugar production, this country as a whole would gain. Madam Speaker, I hear people talking about cartels. Interestingly, these cartels are made up of people, some of whom are even in this house. Yes. We must learn to call a spade a spade. Yes. There are members of this house who are part of these cartels. Yes. I wish I knew them. I would have named them today. I would have named them. And interestingly, Madam Speaker, as I speak, they are looking at me. Some of them.
PSC Chairman Opiyo Wandayi, Mark, very quickly, do you think Parliament is serious in dealing with this issue?
One of the key puzzles that the president has to figure out in his fight against corruption, and these cartels are involved in sugar and other things, is how he's going to divorce his fight against corruption from the very politicians who benefit from it. If you look at this entire scenario very carefully, you will see very interesting interests play out in the entire game. Hesbon and I will tell you that when you see two cabinet ministers talking about the same thing from two different positions, you can definitely tell that whoever is influencing them is not influenced by truth, because the truth of the matter, if you ask an Eskimo and you ask a Maasai the color of the sky, they'll tell you it's blue. When they differ, then their teacher was a liar. So whoever is telling the ministers is definitely pulling the wool over our eyes. And therefore the question must be, why is wool being pulled over our eyes? Number one, we must understand that if you are going to get sugar from Mogadishu, it is not going to be pure. Because I can tell you the grenades and bombs and things like that that happen in Mogadishu, and them not having sugarcane farms, tells you that wherever their sugar is coming from is not going to be pure. Secondly, when the person importing the sugar will remain faceless and nameless and bring in that sugar, he's only remaining faceless and nameless to the extent that he is willing to buy the cheapest sugar in the market for the Kenyan consumer. So the fact of the matter is this, that is there goodwill in the public to fight this particular vice? Yes, there is. Are the two ministers doing the right thing? Yes, they are. They've imported many, many tons of sugar. And there are a number of things that Kenyans must be aware of. Number one, is this evasion of the proper way with which to treat sugar imports? That's the first issue. Secondly, these people who brought in this substandard sugar, why weren't they millers? Why didn't they take them to factories and let it be milled? The third thing that is very critical, the tests that we do on importing our sugar.
Right.
There's a company called Intertech, which was allowed by the Kenya Bureau of Standards to do so. What was the job that it did? What is the storage? Why are we storing sugar in Isili? What kind of facility is there? So there are lots of things that needs to be fixed. Right. But what the president needs to look at, he needs to look at the Ministry of Finance, he needs to look at the Ministry of Agriculture, and they need to give a proper plan as to who, when, and how sugar is imported.
Right.
Then you need to talk to the Ministry of Industrialization to make sure that the industries such as Sony Sugar, which can't afford to pay its farmers, can't afford to pay its workers, but yet it's spending 2.5 billion shillings to import sugar, that is reversed order. You cannot rob Paul, fight Paul, and then go and rob Peter as well. Who are you benefiting other than yourself? So those are the changes that need to happen.
Good points. Let's go back to Parliament and listen to the Leader of Majority in the National Assembly, Aden Duale, speaking on the same issue.
We want this committee to invite SGS, the only inspection company that allowed a bad sugar to come to our country. SGS must be held responsible. CABS must be held responsible. KRM must be held responsible, whoever is in charge. And Madam Chair, if you allow me, tomorrow I am going to table in this house over 100 companies that were given duty-free status. I'm going to table it. It's in my office. We must speak. I mean, you know, the problem in our country, I saw somebody talking about diamond wholesalers. Diamond wholesalers don't import sugar. Mega wholesalers don't. Even the guy in Matu and Kitui, Mount Kenya wholesalers, he doesn't import. He buys. He buys. And Madam Chair, if we have agreed to clean Kenya, let us clean Kenya completely. Let us not clean Kenya halfway. Yes, let us not clean Kenya as it suits you.
The Leader of Majority in the National Assembly, Aden Duale, and that 3 billion shillings worth of sugar that was imported on the 18th of December 2017, that was some 55,000 metric tons, valued at 3 billion Kenya shillings, was going to the South Nyanza Sugar Company, Sony, in the county of Migori. Husband, on your way to the village, you pass through a window,
yes,
where Sony Sugar Company is located. Just what is the real cause of this, and how can this be stopped?
Now, before I even go to the real cause, I think the damage is a lot more devastating to people from the sugar belt. Dismas talks about people using sugarcane as firewood. I've seen people commit suicide because their sugar has overstayed without being harvested by Sony Sugar. And they had loans, they depended on the amount of money they were going to get from that sugar. And you know, when it goes beyond 24 months, then the value for that sugar again diminishes. So it's a lot more worse than people think. People are not losing jobs, people are losing lives. But what exactly is the cause? I think everything that we are seeing, even in Parliament and the list of companies that we have here, the 40 billion worth of sugar that was imported in 3 months leading up to the election, all this is politics and corruption. And we need to speak the truth that this money was used in the political campaign. That is why it is in 2017 that we've had all these, importers given a zero rate, excise duty to import sugar. And I think the onus is on the president to deal with this. If the country demands 800,000 metric tons and they have a deficit of 200,000, then you also have a government that is talking about, 4 key agenda items, and one of them being manufacturing. Then you don't need to move too far. Just zero in on manufacturing. That if we are going to expand our manufacturing sector, and sugar is such a big thing, there are families that are dependent on sugar in Western Kenya and in parts of Southwest Kenya, especially where I come from. Then what is the government doing to just give these industries the capacity? Because from where I sit, and I grew up, in the sugar belt, I went to school, my school was surrounded by sugar, Sony was not very far away, we would see the smoke. I know that the government has what it takes to capacitate these industries in Western Kenya and any other place. Like right now, I think in Kisii, they are thinking of setting up an industry in South Mugirango. If the government has the goodwill and wants to expand the manufacturing sector, sugar is giving them that opportunity. There is enough arable land in this country to grow sugar. Why should we import beet sugar from Brazil? Why are we even importing from Egypt and some very interesting countries like Zimbabwe? So the buck stops with the president, and I think Parliament should stop making a lot of noise. They should just point the issue to the right direction, legislate and say, just like President Uhuru Kenyatta during the campaign said that Raila Odinga, we cannot solve our problems by inviting foreigners. Sugar is also a problem. We cannot sort our sugar industry by importing sugar.
Right.
We need to build capacity.
Right.
And I agree with Honorable Mark Nyamita that the first thing the government needs to do is to mop up the sugar industry. Make sure that no a private company is importing sugar. If there is deficit of 200,000, then it should be the prerogative of the government-owned sugar millers to deal with that.
All right, very good points. And already the sugar millers have been having their problems, Kipchumba. But then in those 3 months in 2017, the government allowed this free-for-all importation of sugar. They did not have the money, the public-owned sugar millers, to be able to import the sugar on their own quota. So this, brought about these private millers and private companies to import. So, how do you help the sugar industry from such a? It seems to be so deep into the problems. Where does the solution lie?
Ben, it is so unfortunate that we are staring at a manifest genocide and we are discussing just the side issues. Oh, cartel B, so and so. The main thing is this, which we need to ask ourselves. One, sugar in itself, smuggling of sugar, the cartels, the bureaucrats, the people in cabs and all these standardization organizations, that is where the problem lies. But for us to heap our problems to the millers is a mistake in itself, because the millers have their own problems under the Kesma thing headed by the same Rai. And for us to just single out one Rai, who is a miller with 9 companies, I think we are taking a problem, we are forcing a problem to the wrong corner. Look at it this way. How in the first place do we have a policy or a legislation that says that anybody can import sugar? The problem is here. We must also tell the public the truth. The truth is there is no sugar that contains mercury or these metals known. That is the fact, because this sugar comes from somewhere. And Brazil, Swaziland, Zimbabwe or anywhere cannot allow to export sugar which has those heavy metals in them. Because of this, they will not allow themselves to sign a certificate of conformity, knowing very well that this sugar contains metals in them. That risks their whole credibility in the market. Where does the problem fall? The problem falls, you bring in sugar. And again, we must understand, there are types of sugar. There is industrial sugar used at the industry level for confectionery, making alcohol, all these manner of things. Secondly, we have the processed sugar, the sugar that comes directly ready for consumption. And then thirdly, we have the raw sugar. This raw sugar is the sugar that should only be imported by somebody who is a manufacturer or who is a miller. Because raw sugar means there are some processes which are not been completed. And that's why in some of these goonie bags, you see they have written not for consumption. Because it's either industrial sugar or raw sugar. But the problem comes in at handling stage. As Bichachi said, you import sugar, you are not a miller. You have a go down in industrial area where you have been keeping there, let's say, some other chemicals. Or you have been keeping there clinker, that cement thing. And you use the same containers that carry clinker to carry sugar to another warehouse in Western Kenya. What happens along the way? The sugar will be contaminated with clinker and we'll start saying, sugar has mercury, sugar has this. It is how we handle. And the problem comes in when you give each and every person a license to import sugar just because they have idle money they are given. The policy should be this, and my appeal to the president is this: to safeguard farmers, genuine millers, and to safeguard the Kenyan consumer.
All right.
Give the licenses to the millers because we know them. They are known. If government-owned millers do not have money, give it to private millers. We know them. They are not 1 million. They are roughly around 40.
Why
but
not
let
advance money to the government?
Let me just finish. We give them to them if government cannot advance money to their own millers. But going forward, where we are now, we must also say the truth. We are caught up in a situation what happened in Colombia some years back. We are caught up in a fight between cartels. The same way Kali cartel and the Medellin cartel were battling, that is where we are. And that is why the ministers of Uhuru Kenyatta cannot stand in broad daylight and say we either have mercury in sugar or not. Because I think from the way they have been presenting themselves, it is as if there are cartels in each side. And look at how that has affected even the thinking within the DPP. You cannot wake up in the morning and have a spurious charge like attempted murder. You cannot attempt to murder people you don't know. If I am to be charged with attempted murder, it is against Ben Kitili or somebody I know. So the whole thing in itself is convoluted.
All right, so Kipchumba's given us the way forward from where he sits. Let's go back to Parliament again and listen in to the Dagoretti North Member of Parliament, Simba Arati, speaking on the same issue of sugar.
Jana tuliuliza waziri Kiunjuri kwa mkutano. Mimi nilimuuliza, waziri, tell us who is the owner of the sugar which was destroyed in Mombasa. What he told us is the owners are Diamond Wholesalers. Tukamuuliza, Diamond Wholesalers sio mtu, tuambie. Waziri hakuweza. Lakini Diamond Wholesalers si mwingine, is one of us in Parliament who brings sugar. Who brings sugar. And that sugar was destroyed in Mombasa.
All right, Simbarati there, spilling the beans, something that he seems to know about. Let me take your final thoughts on. I mean, there's no one. We can't discuss this in 30 minutes only. But Hezbon, from where he sits, he has told us it's about the cartels. It's the Cali versus Medellin, like happened in Colombia. So, what is the solution of dealing with the cartels before now trying to cure the sugar industry, sugar belt, the farmers, the millers?
But, you know, the only person who has the popular mandate of all Kenyans who can address the issues of cartel is the president, President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. And if he has ministers who are speaking from different positions, he has, you know, heads of agencies who are talking about things that are in contradiction to what cabinet secretaries are saying, then he needs to rein in.
All right.
And I think that is where the buck stops, that President Uhuru Kenyatta needs to come out firmly on what should happen in the sugar industry.
Solution, Mark, very quickly.
There's a number of things that need to happen. Number one, the politicians and cartels that are in bed together need to be thrown under the bus. That is exactly what happened in Colombia when those cartels were fighting. You've got to have some sacred cows sacrificed on the altar of the fight against corruption as quickly as possible. Number two, the support for local industry has to be shown. And local industry in two respects. Number one, we need to streamline how companies like Sony Sugar and Mia Sugar, which are government concerns, are handled and treated. Number two, we cannot fight our own industrialists. It does not make sense. We can't fight independent millers who are providing services and yet they are Kenyans. Let's remember that. The third thing that needs to happen very quickly is Kenya needs to jealously guard its farmers and her people. How do we guard our farmers? The reason why the sugar from elsewhere is cheaper is not rocket science. Number one, the government facilitated for them to receive the best technology and to subsidize the production of the sugarcane by the farmers. The government needs to do this as soon as possible. Let's remember, those 200,000 farmers represents families. That is around 1 to 2 million Kenyans who depend on those 200,000 people. So we need to support them as quickly as possible. Number three, there needs to be fixed legislation on everything that we import. If we are going to import, let's say, coffee. We've never imported coffee. But we need to know, and there's an organization in government that knows this, that there's a deficit of 100,000 bags. Bring 100,000 bags and no more. There is no emergency in bringing excess. So that's what needs to happen as quickly as possible.
This is what needs to happen now. Very quickly, 30 seconds only.
What we need to do is to ask between Dr. Matiang'i and Dr. Adan Mohamed, who is lying to the nation. Because Matiang'i says the sugar has got impurities. On the other hand, Adan Mohamed said there is no impurities. Now, in case we have impurities, how come the entire sugar lot has not been recalled? That's number one. Number two, it seems like we have a systems failure. How on earth can you allow substandard sugar or sugar less with impurities to come to the Kenyan market? Where are all these products? And then number three, the members of the National Assembly, they've got immunity when they're in the chambers. Why can't they ask for these companies so that we lift the veil of incorporation. The standard has listed a number of these companies.
Right.
But while they're in the National Assembly, at the chambers, why can't they lift the veil of incorporation so that we actually know who is in this business? Because, you know, it's very disheartening for the Honorable Simba Arati to say that there's a member of the National Assembly who is a member of this cartel. Then there's a very high probability that this cartel member is going to be in this committee investigating this sugar crisis. So then how do you expect to get any positive results? And for me, I get very worried, unlike Makia, when you have two cabinet secretaries serving in the same administration appointed by Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, one saying the sugar in Kenya is perfect, have more tea, and another one saying that it's laced with impurities. So between Dr. Matiang'i and Adan Mohamed, who do we believe? Again, do we believe the Kenya Bureau of Standards? Do we believe KPA? Do we believe KRA? Who do we believe?
All right, let's leave it there, gentlemen. It's a conversation that we'll continue to have here and try to get to the bottom of every issue and try to find solutions. You're watching Sunday edition here on KTN News. Let's take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we switch gears and talk about matters politics. This is our Sound of the Week.
Sisi ni watu tuko rada, hatujatupa mbao na hatujapoteza network. Tunajua tunaenda wapi, tunajua tunatoka wapi na tunajua kazi yetu ni gani.